Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, we're going to talk about Hellebores and show you some Hellebore maintenance, which is actually very, very little. Hellebores, or Lenton Roses, as people call them, are great perennial plants that are for part shade or shade. A lot of people say they need moist, kind of well-drained conditions. I find them to be extremely drought tolerant once they get themselves established. Like the first year or two, sometimes they'll struggle a bit in dry spaces, but once they get anchored in, it seems like they'll just grow anywhere that the sun doesn't cook them. In the afternoon, most people watching can grow Hellebores. We have a long history with Lenton Roses as humans. We've been hybridizing these for a long time. They're native to Asia and Eastern Europe, and there's a lot of different species. Almost everything you would buy from a store will be some sort of hybridized plant. Made it to the US by the 1700s. And an interesting history of people making poisons and invisibility powder and dewormer and all kinds of things people have tried with this plant, but it's just a good ornamental flowering plant. And here we are in January, and you see all these big these flowers poking up over this hybrid Hellebore. Now through breeding, we're seeing interesting foliage, really long flower times, big flowers. Typically, Hellebore flowers are nodding, meaning they point downward, and so they're not as showy as we would like. But now through breeding, we're seeing that more and more. We can see the flowers a bit more. So I'm going to show you a little bit of maintenance. So here we are around the 12th of January, which is probably a little early in my 7B garden in Raleigh to see this much color on our Lenton Roses. Normally it's probably a little more into February before we're actually seeing real color, but by now we're usually seeing this new growth start to emerge in the middle. This foliage, which comes out kind of after the flowering, the new foliage, looks great all summer, especially on some of these new ones where we've really they've introduced some variegation and some interesting leaves. Really, they get tattered and tired by the end of the season, but I leave them on there through the winter until we start to see this new growth emerge in the middle of them, and usually a little earlier than this, right when the new growth emerges. I go in here and cut all of this all the way back, and basically what we want to do is not have this old tattered foliage distract from what's about to happen here, which is a very long bloomed perennial that, you know, we'll be putting on a show for a while. But I just go all the way around these. You can see very quickly how much of an improvement this actually is. This material can just go on a compost pile somewhere, or just immediately be thrown under a shrub and become mulch for another plant. Right there, look how great that looks. And I found an ivy that had come up here that needed to come out as well. A lot of the Hellebores in the garden came from Pine Knot Farms, and they have an open house toward the, I think right in the middle of February maybe. You can look that up on their website, but that's where a lot of these came from. And they sell them in 6-packs. We like to buy them in 6-packs. This is an example of that. So this one's, that other one you just saw, they were planted at the same time, but that one was in a gallon pot over there, and it's bigger, but it was quite a bit more costly. This one we bought in a little 6-pack as a plug, and it's taken a year and a half longer to really get any. It's going to have pretty good size on it this year, but it's worth the wait because it was quite a savings. We also have some fetid Hellebores, and the foliage on those tends to look terrific, and they bloom very, very early in the season, so I don't cut those back. As you can see from what I've cut off already, this is one that's gone really, really wild, and it had growth even late in the season, which looks very good. So I'm not going to take that off. I'm only going to selectively prune back all the way to the ground, just the oldest foliage off of this one, because again, it still looks pretty good. This one's in a very dry shaded space, and again, just a spot that I think some people wouldn't want to put it. Just initially, we had to do a little more watering on it than we would in other places, but amazingly resilient. But anything that looks tattered like that, just chase it back into the plant and cut it completely out, and we'll have flowers up in here in the next few weeks. As you can see in the back garden, we just leave the leaves as mulch during the winter time. We'll eventually put a more decorative mulch cap over it later in the winter. Again, flowers coming up on the top of it. I can go in here and unbury this just a bit, help it out, pushing those flowers up through the middle and clean up the old foliage off of it. And this will just look really great in a week or so. My aspidistra next to it also needs this same kind of love right now, cutting back some of the old material. The other thing we'll do is in the next few weeks, we'll fertilize basically everything in the garden with an organic fertilizer. So these will get it, at that exact same time. And they don't require very much fertilizer. They don't require very much attention, except for, again, just that once a year pruning I just did. And there you go. Within, I would say, a week or two, all of these pieces down here at the bottom will be up about this tall and in full flower. We actually have several of these evergreen perennials that toward the end of winter, it's a good idea to clean up. So I've got, cast iron plants here, which, the oldest foliage will cut back, but I wait a little bit later on those. The only reason I get in here and do the hellebores now is because the flowers are already coming, and it's much harder to do once they're all the way up and in full flower. I've got some rhodia japonica in front of it. It's another example. If it looks tattered near the end of winter, it does get some pruning, even though it's evergreen. So we've got hellebores everywhere. This is the driest place in this garden. This mahonia doesn't mind. Cast iron plants don't mind. Rhodia doesn't mind. The Elysium behind me doesn't mind. But and then hellebores don't mind either. It's just amazing. But again, if you are going to put them in a dry space, keep an eye on them for the first couple of years. And then if you have a moist, well-drained space, you can almost put them in the ground and walk away from them. They're that easy. And once a year, I fertilize once a year. I cut them back, clean them up, and they just look terrific all season long. But and again, I'll pull back a few of the leaves just to make it a little easier for them to push flowers up in the next few weeks. So that's it. Just basic hellebore maintenance. Again, that we humans have a long relationship with this plant, hybridizing it, and it's been in the United States for a long time, and it's come a long way. I think we've seen major jumps forward. There's tons of new hybrids, named hybrids every year, with just beautiful foliage, beautiful flower colors that we've never seen before, and great plants. A little pricey compared to other things, but I'll tell you that these can take 3 and 4 years to do just a 1-gallon container and get them up to a blooming size. So keep that in mind as you're looking at them at retail and you're comparing them to other things. There's a reason, there's a big reason that they're more expensive. It took a lot more effort and time. So thank you guys for watching and following along, and there'll be lots of these how-to pruning and maintenance videos during the spring.